Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. Thank you so much for joining us. Are you looking about personal transformation and enriching your lives? Well, this conversation is definitely for you. Let me tell you about my guest today. My guest is Gahl Sasson. He's an established thinker, storyteller, published author, student and teacher of astrology, Kabbalah, and mythology and comparatively religion. Today's conversation is all focused on his work, which he's been doing for over 10 years. His first book, A Wish Can Change Your Life, has been translated into over 8 languages and is endorsed by HH on the 14th Dalai Lama. His latest work, Cosmic Navigator, is the essential reference guide to understanding your own astrologic makeup. He is a contributor to the Huffington Post, Astrology.com, Infinity Quest, and many more. Today, we'll be talking to him about his life, why he felt that we need to understand our genetic makeup through our astrology. We'll also be talking about his own journey, his book, what it means, and how you can all get a copy of his book. I'm truly excited to talk to him as he currently resides in Los Angeles, but gives seminars and workshops regularly in over 13 countries. Let's meet our wonderful guest, Gahl, as he shares his incredible story and explain to you his work. What is truly astrology? Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. As I said in my introduction, today's conversation is all about transforming your life using methods we've not really talked about before. I think we've had various conversations about this, but this would be more in depth. How do you transform your life to enrich what you do and become a better person? My guest, Gahl, will be telling us about his own journey, why he started this, and how astrology, psychology, and Kabbalah could help you in your own way. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me over.
I'm really impressed to have you over because you are an established author. Let's always remind ourselves about this. You're a thinker. You run workshop on storytelling, which is something I think we're going to touch on later because I would like to understand what you do in the storytelling. You are really a reader. You understand people, you tell their journey, you look at someone and you just tell you look at them and talk about how to enrich their life using your methods. Before we get started into all of that, Gahl, can you tell us a little bit about who are you?
Oh my God, that's going to take a few lifetimes. I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, that's a very, very deep question. But in a more practical way, I think that from an early age, I noticed that there is something repeating in life. I won't forget it. I remember I came to my mother. We were back in Israel because we lived in Canada for a while. I was 4 years old. It had to be 4 years old. And I came to my mother one Saturday. She was cleaning the house. She was a very hardworking teacher. And the only time to clean the house was Saturday morning. And I told her, I just had a thought. And she says, what? And she's cleaning the floor. I told her, last week was last week, right? And she says, yes. And next week is going to be next week. And she says, yes. I told her, it's all repeating. Every Saturday, we wake up thinking it's a day off because in Israel, it was the only day off. We didn't have a weekend. We just had the Saturday. And instead of just having something nice to do, you clean the house. Father was a coach for soccer. So he was in the soccer competitions and all that. And it's all the same. It's repeating itself. I mean, we're locked in this cycle. Mm-hmm. And I was freaking out. And she said, just go to your room and make it ready for me to clean. She didn't really address it. And I understand. I mean, it's very difficult from a 4-year-old. And then I remember I was 6 years old and we're learning about the seasons and I got goosebumps. And I thought, again, it's happening. Winter always comes after fall and fall always comes after summer. We're trapped in this lock, and I think that started my way of thinking about patterns, about cycles. And at first it shocked me about how much we're trapped in these cycles, in these repetitions, and what do we need to do in order to break away from it? That's what I was thinking all the time. How do we break away from it? And what happened, I think, is that I started, because of my inclination to identifying cycles, because from an early age, that's what I taught myself. I think I started looking at it more and more and more. And that's what pulled me towards studying psychology, because and that's something that I really recommend for all the viewers to start paying attention to, the signs and the omens. I'm not saying being paranoid about everything that happens, the picture of you and your husband falls down on the floor, and that means, okay, we need to get divorced. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying to pay attention to synchronicities, to coincidences, because I decided, maybe because I'm in Aries, and Aries keyword is I am. So my job is to test things before I tell other people to do it. That's why Aries are considered to be the sacrificial lamb, because usually they sacrifice themselves and they don't make it to being a ram. But those that are able to get to ram are the people that can show us the way. So I'm still figuring it out. But what I've noticed is that there is a way to break patterns if you pay attention to signs. So for example, when I finished my army, I needed to choose something to study in university, and I really didn't know what, because I was interested in so many things. And then one day I returned back from the beach, because I lived in Haifa, it's by the Mediterranean. And then I said, okay, today I have to decide what to study. And then I swear to God, I looked at the sign where I lived for 15, 20 years, and the sign of my house, my address, and it says Freud Street 26. That's where I live. And I thought, it can't be that blunt, the sign. I said, it is, because this sign I've seen every day, and I never asked the sign for help. And today is the first time I asked for signs for help, and I realized I need to study psychology, and I signed in to psychology. Now, what I didn't understand is that the 26 is part of the message. And later on, when I got to Mexico, way after I studied psychology, I realized that 26 is the holy number in Kabbalah that is associated with the name of God. In fact, in numerology, if you look at God and you look at the numerology of God, it will end up 26, just like Yahweh is 26. And even in the Kundalini Yoga, if you do anything, they'll tell you to do it 26 times. So apparently, it's a holy number that crosses cultures. And that was the second part of my message, that I need to study psychology so it could lead me to understanding patterns and similarities in different cultures. And that was the 26. So what I'm saying is that the only way to break patterns, the only way to get us out of pain or get us out of cycles that repeat, is to pay attention to the signs and then break the pattern. And it's interesting that we're having this conversation right now, a few days after the full moon in Scorpio, which ended up being an eclipse and a supermoon. So it's kind of auspicious. Again, that's how signs work, because we didn't plan it like that. And what happened in that specific full moon, the full moon in May, is that that's when the Buddha was born, attained enlightenment, and died. And think about the Buddha. He decided, or Siddhartha, he decided to go on a journey to discover the source of suffering and how to break the suffering. And what he came and told us is the suffering is about desiring things we cannot have. So it's not that you cannot wish for being healthier, wish for being smarter and more physically fit, or whatever it is that your wish is for. That your wishes is fine. But when you desire something that you cannot have, you cause suffering. And the only way to break it is to pay attention to it. And one of the things that both the story of Jesus, the story of Muhammad, the story of Siddhartha tell us, that just before enlightenment, though, what do we encounter? 3 temptations. And that led me to understand the 3 temptations of Christ, the 3 temptations of Muhammad, the 3 temptations of Siddhartha, is that in order to break a pattern, because that's what Siddhartha wanted to break us away from samsara, that constant reincarnation cycle, you're going to have to do something 3 times. You're going to have to say no 3 times, because the universe is going to tempt you, not because it's evil, not because the devil is evil. It's because it wants to make sure, are you serious about this, or this is just a fag or some like a trend that you're looking into? Are you serious? So I'm going to tempt you 3 times, let's say with a partner that's not good for you, somebody who's not available, because that's your pattern. You always fall for somebody not available. So I'm going to send from you to you the perfect person, but not available. What did you say? No. Okay, good. Now I'll send you another one just to make sure. And finally, I'll send you the 3rd. And when you get to the 3rd and you said no to your pattern 3 times, it disintegrates, it falls down, it breaks down. So that's part of what I've learned, not only from mythology and religion and psychology, but also from Kabbalah and astrology, because the sphere in the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life that represents the goddess, by the way, the feminine energy is understanding, what is called Binah in Hebrew. And that's ruled by Saturn, the Lord of Karma, the one that helps us break patterns. So it is understanding that comes to us by saying 3 times no to a pattern. So I think that what my journey taught me is that astrology, Kabbalah, these are old wisdom, traditional wisdoms. Think about Sufism, think about yoga. These are old system of psychology that had to be attached to a religion and to very specific storytelling mechanism, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Torah, whether it's the New Testament, because otherwise they wouldn't be anchored in something in the past, because for people, usually what is traditional is safe because it was tested, which makes sense. That's what we do with medicine. Mm-hmm. But to these days, what we can strive to connect to is actually stories and mythologies. And we are getting so many beautiful stories right now. We're now at the golden age of TV, for example. There's beautiful TV, there's great books, there's many creative outlets right now that allows, it basically democratized wisdom, you can say, in the last few years, that allows us to listen to music from people's studios, books from people's laptops. We are bombarded with a lot of truth. So that's what we all try to do. And I hope that I participate.
Well, God, that's an amazing introduction of yourself, because I think I didn't even know a lot of this about you. And you've just summarized it in really in a short synopsis of who you are, how you got here. But when you look back at your parents' upbringing, I remember you just told us the story about your mum. When you asked about this question about the season, when you look about your childhood when growing up, what was it really like? Because was your family into this? Were they curious like the way you are? Because you're quite a curious person to get to where you are today.
Not really. I think that my parents were both atheists, because growing up in Israel in the 60s, 70s, nobody was, maybe 10, 20% were religious. The rest were very, very secular. So we grew up on, Russian culture and European culture, American a little bit, not that much at those times. And it wasn't very common for kids to think the way I thought. That's why I didn't have that many friends growing up, because I wasn't so interested in what boys at that time, because you play with boys usually, had to do. And with the girls, I used to play a lot, but because they were much more open to imagination. So with the girls, it was possible to play pretend games much more with the boys. But no, I had to hide it all. I think that I've learned the idea of occultism, occultism coming from occulto, from hidden, from mysterious, from secret, because from an early age, I started getting these images and these stories of a different dimension. And I was kind of confused by all of that. So I just wrote it down. I wrote everything down, like automatic writing, when I was like 12, 13, 14. It really helped me deal with teenage stuff. But also later on, I realized that I was writing a lot of probably memories from past life, because a lot of what I wrote, I later on read about it in Kabbalah. And my parents never talked about past lives. We never talk about the afterlife. We never discuss these kind of things. And yet I have pages and pages about reincarnation and what I was and all of that kind of stuff, which I was so terrified from that I locked it in the closet. Literally, I had a closet with a key and I put all of those books there. And for me, it was a symbol of how a lot of my mysticism and a lot of my beliefs was in that closet. And it took me a long time to bring those things out. So I remember even my mother one time told me, if you speak to yourself, it's one sign of madness. And it really was a moment that I was freaking out. I was 13 years old. And I shared for the first time that when I ride my bicycle really fast, I sometimes start talking, to the wind, because the wind is so high, is so fast on you, and nobody can hear you. So you can scream things. And she said, well, that's the sign of somebody losing his mind. And I was like, oh my God. Okay. So I guess I have to keep it in the closet and lock it even more.
Absolutely. I think parents, I never seem to understand. And you started this because you got older, you found this journey, And you went on to become a storyteller because you felt the storytelling method was a better way of communicating to people, getting people to understand. Can you just tell us a little bit about why storytelling, what does it mean, and what impact it has on others?
For storytelling has helped us evolve, helped us become who we are. Because if you go back in time, and if you think about the development of language, the development of our ability to communicate, now we have more and more signs that gossip was the reason why we survived, why we became humans. Because at first, I mean, chimpanzees that are the closest to us, they live in troops of 50 max, because they have to groom themselves. Now, humans started living in, even Homo erectus from 2 million years ago, they started living in groups of 100, even leading up to 150. And the only way you could do that without grooming each other, because then you have to groom all day long, is to develop what is called vocal grooming, meaning we start talking about each other, and that way we know what each person is doing. And that is something that anthropologists tell us, that gossip, stories about people that are not present, is the basis of evolution. And then my idea was behind that it's interesting because I always believe the names that we have, our names, our given names, hold a lot of truth. That's something very connected to Near Eastern philosophies. In the Bible, you have 80 times where the author stops after bringing a new name and explain what that name means, which is really interesting because if you know Hebrew and you read the Bible, you can figure it out. But 80 times the author stopped and explained, for example, Moses, because she drew him out of the water and so forth. So it means that names carry your story. And then I thought about the story of the gossip, and I thought, how are we going to know who are we talking about unless we start tagging people or giving them names? So if I want to gossip with you about that crazy guy that hunted a puma or whatever, you're going to say, who was it? I say, oh, you know, the guy with the long beard. Everybody has long beards. Okay, the guy that, always kind of flaps his hands when he eats. Oh, yeah, the flapping hand guy. Yes, that became his name. So what happened is that we started finding names that describe us the best. And then, of course, we forgot all of that. But the idea is that stories and names of stories kind of brought us together and developed that social connection that allowed us to grow from 50 to 100 and 150. And later on, of course, have countries that are 1.4 or 1.5 billion. What puts all of the Chinese together? What makes the Russians Russians? What makes the people from UK? Their history, their combined understanding of what happened, So the idea of stories is extremely important, and how we tell our stories is also extremely important.
Well, I have to ask you in terms of when you think about what you do the astrologies, you do psychology, and you do Kabbalah. Someone might ask the question, what is the interlink between all three of these? Can you just, gently explain to a layman who doesn't really understand all three of this and why they work well together?
Because they're all systems that try to help you explain life and explain who you are. If you know who you are and you know where you are, then you can decide where you're going to be and where you want to be. But without knowing where you are and who you are, you cannot. And I think that Jung, the great psychologist, one time said, because he studied astrology quite a lot, and he said that psychology has much more to learn from her older sister astrology than astrology from psychology. And it totally makes sense. I think that in the past, before psychology was established, let's say before Freud, all of the astrologers were the psychologists. The rabbis were the psychologists. The mullahs and the priests were the psychologists. I mean, what is confession booth? You come and say what you've done. That whole idea of Kabbalah, which in Hebrew means to accept. What is Kabbalah's premise? In one sentence, it's a system of mysticism, wisdom that can help you understand life and the working of the universe. So basically, the whole idea of Kabbalah in Hebrew means to accept, is how can I accept or receive light in order to give that light to other people? How can I become a vehicle of light. I get light from the divine. I process that light like a factory. Now I have more light because I'm a creative person, and I pull that light and I give it to other people. And then God sees that I've done it, so he gives me more light, like an investment, so I can process even more of that and give it more to other people. That light could be money, that light could be ideas, that light could be a connection. Everybody has their own currency. Psychology is the same thing. It tries to connect your unconscious, your subconscious to your conscious, to connect your ego to your higher self. And astrology does the same thing. Astrology is as above, so below. It tries to understand how we are functioning in our celestial environment. Now we're understanding how ecology is so important, but ecology is not stopping in Earth. I mean, we're part of the solar system, part of the galaxy, and that's the viewpoint that astrology has.
Go. What are some of your favorite compelling myths that shines a light on how you see the world? Because the world is very complex, and especially with the pandemic, it's brought so much question to so many minds. Well, how do you see the world when you look at it through these lenses?
One of my favorite characters that really guides me is Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer. He's a centaur, which makes him half horse, half human. So his body is very much like a horse, which means something of the earth. The upper body and the nervous system is all human. So it's a beautiful mix of human and beast in a sense. And he was abandoned because his mother thought he was really ugly, because she expected to have a normal human, and what came up is not what she expected. And therefore, she prayed so hard for the goddess to transform her into a tree, because she didn't want to be the mother of this hideous creature. And what happened is that you have this abandoned little baby horsey under a tree, linden tree, funny enough, and crying. Basically, his mother abandoned him. And I think that in many ways, all of us experience this feeling of a little bit of abandonment, because we were part of the one before we were born. Mm-hmm. And when we're coming out of our mother's womb, because the mother womb is kind of like a compromise, you know what? I'm not at one with God, but at least I'm at one with my mother. You know what I mean? So at least it's not that bad. I still feel connected. Suddenly we're pushed out. You're not even welcomed out. It's like, yeah, with screams and pain. And everybody thinks about the pain of the mother, but what about the pain of the baby that has to go through that really scary thing and coming out of darkness into the light and squeezing through something kind of soft? And it's kind of traumatic, I'm sure. And suddenly you're departed from that oneness. You're no longer part of God. You are, but you're not. You have now a long distance with God for the next life. And you're going to have every once in a while a little text, a little, you're going to send a lot of texts, and even he was going to see, even you don't get the blue little lines that God received it. You're going to live in this suspense of disbelief until you die, unless you work really hard on yourself. So one of the reasons why we are doing all this work in psychology and in mythology and in Kabbalah and Sufism is to go get these glimpses of connection, to go on dates with God, in a sense, even if it's a one-night stand, because you feel so connected to the divine one day and you feel that oneness. The day after, you might not. That is this mortal coil, like Shakespeare talked about. So in many ways, we feel like this Chiron, abandoned. And what happened, strangely enough, is that Artemis and Apollo, these twins, the god of the sun and the goddess of the moon, adopt him. They basically take pity on him and they adopt him. Why? Again, it's the sun and the moon, mother and father. So your biological mother and father might not be your real mother and father, because you lived many lifetimes. And our real mother and father is God and goddess, you can say, the sun and the moon. They see everything in dark and in night, in masculine and feminine. And not only they adopted him, they gave him their powers. So Artemis gave him the knowledge of herbs, made him a perfect hunter, made him compassionate and a healer. And Apollo gave him the ability to prophesize, the ability to fight. So he became the wounded healer, somebody that can heal everybody, but not himself. At first, it was not only psychological issues that he couldn't heal himself from, but if you think about Chiron, he was the teacher of Ajax and of Achilles and Hercules and Patroclus, and everybody who is a who and who studied with him. It was like the Ivy School to go to, his crystal cave. And what happened one day is Hercules came back and showed off how he defeated the Medusa, and the sword of Achilles that was Hercules that was full of poison touched the heel of Chiron, and he was wounded. Now he's supposed to die because this is a poison that there is no antidote to. But the gods loved him so much that they granted him immortality.
Wow.
And what you have is the creation of that archetype of the wounded healer, somebody that can heal everybody, teach everybody, but cannot heal himself. But because of that, he's going to live forever. So think about the idea of this. Your imperfection, your pain, your difficulties, your challenges are what make you immortal. They're not there to destroy you. They are the means by which you will be remembered forever, whether it's through your work, whether it's through the energy that you gave. So our imperfection, whatever we don't like about ourselves, that's what makes us divine. That's the beautiful aspect of that story. Now, if you dig deep in this mythology, you're going to see so many more layers of truth. But the idea is that you're not alone because everybody feels alone.
Absolutely.
That's why you're not alone. And B, you are adopted by the sun and the moon. Don't worry. You are taken care of. And that adapting gives you a lot of superpowers. And you just have to discover, how do I discover my superpowers? Look at your pain. Look at your suffering. There you will feel it. Precisely like the Dalai Lama said, that he said to us, our suffering is what helps us develop compassion. There is no compassion without suffering. And now we call it suffering and joy, but from above, there is no suffering and joy. There is no good and bad. There is just one.
It is such a beautiful way of looking at it because, even though my thing and the whole conversation is all about painless universal, we talk about pain, and the way you've just analyzed it and shared this story in a beautiful way, I really think my viewers will be so honored to hear this.
I'll just add something about that because for the viewers, I think it's really important. Think about why are people going to Pisa? Have you been to Pisa in Italy? The crooked tower, the tower that leans, the tower that tilts. They get 1 million visitors a year to come and see a tower that is imperfect. Instead of standing erect like a normal tower, it's tilted. It was a terrible mistake of the architect who did it, who ran away from Pisa of shame. We don't even completely know his name. His name should be on the main boulevard in Pisa because the really reason we know about Pisa is not because it's cathedral, which is beautiful and white and totally perfect. It's because of the tower of that. So what it means is that we have an innate attraction to imperfection, because we recognize that. Even if you think about the jeans that you like, the jeans are not perfect. They go through distressing. They go through a lot of processes before you buy them. Some people tear them to be perfect. Yeah. We are programmed to adore and to love our imperfection because that's the place where we can have more creation, more creativity to grow.
Absolutely. You're also an author. You've written a book, A Wish Can Change Your Life. I love that title. A wish can change your life. And in this book, you blend wisdom, of course, across culture and across history. When you think about this book, one of the titles really says it all. A wish can change your life. What motivated you to write this book? And what do you truly mean by a wish can change your life?
Well, what happened was that I was a gardener before I started studying psychology, because I always had a green thumb and I loved trees and I loved anything green. I mean, humans I like also, but trees I really, really love. So I was always fascinated with Kabbalah because of its obsession with the tree of life. The same way that I love Buddhism because the Buddha attained enlightenment under a tree, the Bodhi tree. So, or why I love the Vikings and their Norse tradition because it's all around the Yggdrasil. And then I figured, wait, every tradition on the planet has a tree in the center. It's called the axis mundi, the center of the universe, the place that does not move, the axis of the wheel. So what happened with the class on Kabbalah, that I started doing it because I've realized a few things. First of all, in Genesis, he tells us that when God created Adam and Eve, God created them in their own image. So I realized we have something in ourselves that looks like God. So if you look like God, you probably have some God inside of you, the same way that you probably look like your father and a mixture of your mother, right? So if we look like God, if we're in the image of God, we share something with that. And we know from Kabbalah that God created his universe or her universe using the tree of life as kind of a map of creation. So if we are created in the image of God, therefore we can take how God created the universe, which is us, and mimicking his footsteps. It's almost like a recipe. So I've realized that the tree of life can really help us not only understand how God created the universe, but also how we could create things in our own life. And I started doing this workshop with the tree of life, and people ask me, where's the book? Where can we read about it? And I've realized that in Kabbalah, they become very technical about certain aspects of Kabbalah, which is great. It's like when you go to psychology, you study psychology, you study, personal theories of personality and so forth. But there's no book that describes the tree of life as the wish fulfilling tree, like it's called in Hindu tradition. And that's why I decided to write that book, because I couldn't find any book to recommend people. So that's what I did. I basically recorded my sessions, and then we transcribed it with the author, with Steve Weinstein, and we came up with that because I've noticed that when I tell people just transform to what, but if you decide what you want to work on and you actually start working on it and you have a wish, and I don't call it desire because we talked about it. I don't want to get into trouble with the Buddha who said that desire is the source of suffering, but you can wish for something, and wish is less of an attachment. You're not so obsessed about the outcome. You're kind of wishing for it to happen. Like when you blow your candles on the cake, you're not blaming the cake if you didn't get it within 2 hours. You know what I mean? So that's how I wanted to work with it, because it teaches people how to, again, Kabbalah means to accept or to receive messages, to receive signs. And when you have your wish with you, it gives you a perimeter. It gives you a certain kind of fence. It fences your mind into something. It focuses you. And that is why it's easier to see symbols and sign and interpret it in the context of the wish.
When you talk about astrology, let's go back to that. How does it help you in understanding your spirituality? Because you always interlink the two.
Because you accept. Again, what happened is that if I know that I'm in Aries and I get a little bit hyper now, you're going to accept it because you know I'm in Aries and you know that I have a little bit of fire up there and I'm starting to get a little bit antsy now. So you have to do something to kind of entertain me. Okay. Or if I'm a Gemini and I start doing like this, it means that my nervous system, which is ruled by Gemini, is not getting enough stimuli because you're boring me and you need to change your tone of your voice because I'm leaving. Or if I fall in love and suddenly asleep, maybe I'm a Pisces because I want to go to dream time because it's way more interesting than our date here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I think astrology does, when you learn astrology and you understand the archetypes, you have more compassion towards people and you accept them, and you also accept yourself. Because when you accept yourself, you accept others. When you don't accept yourself, you don't accept others.
And can we include spirituality as part of our lives? So as someone who has not done it before, is that possible to include it in part of our life?
Because people tell me I want to be more spiritual. There is no such thing. Spirituality is oneness. What is spirituality? The connection to the one and understanding that everything is part of the one. That if you go back 13.8 billion years ago, you will find yourself along with everybody, those you hate, those you don't hate, people in the past, people in the future, all of them are going to be together in that infinitely small, infinitely hot space, which we call singularity, funny enough, before it exploded. Not it didn't explode, before it started inflating into existence. So even in science, the story of creation in science is that we're all part of that oneness, that singularity. So the idea is that spirituality is the attempt to get back to that state of oneness while you are still under the illusion of separation. So I have my name, you have your name, but if I would have been totally spiritual, I would be there with you. You would be there here with me. We wouldn't even have to converse because you will know everything I know, and I know everything you know. That whole idea of that oneness, that totality. Therefore, I cannot damage you. I cannot be a misogynist. I cannot be homophobic. I cannot be a racist because I am all of those races. I am all of these orientations. So spirituality is about oneness. And I think that what astrology does, it helps us like a map. Like people would ask, why do you use Google Map? Well, it helps me get to where I need to be. It gives me suggestions I don't always follow, but it gives me suggestion of the fastest route. Same thing with your astrological chart. It gives your soul the fastest route possible, but it's still up to you. I always believed in astrology, unlike some Vedic astrologers, I do believe there is free will. I think that astrology is a wedding between free will and fate. I think there are certain junctions that are predestined that you have to get into, but then it's your choice if you turn left or right.
So, Gahl, you have also written another book. I'm going back to your book now. You've written another one called The Cosmic Navigator, I think something along that line. Why, after writing this one, make the wish one? And did you go on to write the second book? What was this one about?
To be honest, the Cosmic Navigator, the second one, was about astrology, because what I've noticed as I was starting to work more and more in astrology, that I started getting a lot of new ideas or things that I've never read about in the context of astrology. And I had this strange thing that I have to do this before I die. So if I manage to write some of those ideas of past lifetimes and concepts that I developed in astrology, if something happens, life is transient, all things are impermanent, and the Buddha told us, then I have to make sure that there is somewhere, if anybody ever wants in the future to know, well, it's written somewhere. So the Cosmic Navigator was this kind of attempt to defy death in case he comes too fast. And then when I saw it's not coming, I could relax. And then I started writing from 2018 every year a book for the next year. It's my mandala. Mandalas are these beautiful, intricate sand paintings that after they've done it for a month, the Lama will come and basically destroy it to explain and to show impermanence. So that's my yearly astrology book. I write it and it takes me a long time. And then after a few months, it's gone because we have a new year.
You talk a lot about music, and that music plays such an important role in spirituality. How does that relate?
Because music is also going in cycles, verse, choruses, verse, choruses, verse, choruses. There is a progression that is very not strict, but it makes sense to follow. And I think that music, music is very spiritual. Why? Because a lot of time you can listen to a piece of music and you will feel connected either to the music or to the sounds or to the divine through the music. That's why every tradition has its sacred music. And I always was very fascinated with music. In fact, when I was growing up, my spiritual teacher was David Bowie. Completely. I mean, if there's one person that influenced me the most, the rabbi that influenced me the most was definitely David Bowie. And I used to sing with him, not with him, but with his sound in the record. And I used to analyze and try to find the hidden meaning behind his lyrics, whether they were there or not. That taught me that system of ideas of finding mysticism in mythology. Back then, it was the mythology of the lyrics of Bowie. But I basically owe music my survival. I don't think I would have made it as a teenager going through everything in my head without music.
Before I get to my final question, when we talked at the beginning, I said one of the things you do is they achieve personal transformation and enrich people's life. So how do you use the Kabbalah method, the psychology and astrology to help enrich and transform people's lives?
I think by helping them connect to who they are. Like we said, if you want to get from point A to point B, even in Google Map, and I'm sorry I'm using that, but God created us in our own image, in his own image. We created computers in our own image. Therefore, computers are God's grandchildren. That's why we have to start treating technology with respect, the same respect we have to life. So when you go to Google Map, you have to put where you are. How is Google Map going to tell you where to go to the coffee? I mean, where are you? Always Google asks, is it okay to know where you are? No, I don't want to. Or yes, you can find out where I am. So the same thing happens to us with astrology. Astrology helps us help us find out who we are and where we are. And once you know who you are, you can decide who you want to become, where you want to go. And the same thing with Kabbalah. For example, in the story of Kabbalah, what we have is the idea that you really have to learn how to accept yourself before you transform. When I was teaching in Bulgaria about Kabbalah, one of the ladies there grew up in Russia, communist Russia, and she says, that in the dictionary of communism, Kabbalah was, and the definition of Kabbalah was a system of dark magic. Oh. I don't know what dark magic is, but that's how they defined it, And it's interesting because, yes, Kabbalah is associated with magic. For example, abracadabra. You say a lot of time, abracadabra. You know, you guys say abracadabra, right? But abracadabra is actually Aramaic. Aramaic is the language of the root language of Hebrew, Arabic. And abracadabra basically means I shall create that which I said. Abra means to create, kedabra, which I said. So abracadabra is from that tradition of transformation that is connected to Kabbalah. So the idea of transformation, magic, yes, Kabbalah does help you transform. But what is the first premise of Kabbalah? Know thyself, in the sense of accept yourself. You want to change something, accept the change, accept first. You have a lot of pain. First of all, accept your pain. Accept the body that gave you the pain. Accept the pain, love the pain. Once you do that, we can start talking about transformation. Because if not, then you are in that place of, I don't like that pain. I want that pain gone. I detest that pain. I desire for it to go away. Oop, oop, oop. You're getting into a very bad place, because pain, for example, is a messenger. You don't kill the messenger. You destroy what is causing maybe the discomfort, but you cannot blame pain for telling you something's wrong. You know, it's almost like screaming at my neighbor to shut up when he's trying to tell me there is a fire in my backyard.
That is true. Oh my gosh, that is absolutely true. My final question to you, what do you mean when you say, if we accept good and the bad things in our lives, I think almost like what you just said, then we can actually have the magic to change them. Could you, I know you've explained it somewhat, almost like what you previously said, but could you just explain that in your own?
Yeah, you're stuck in traffic and you're really late for a meeting and there is no way that you can get on time. What are you going to do now? Are you going to fret about it? Are you going to be angry about it? Are you going to be pissed at yourself, hate your husband because he talked to you too much in the morning about his issue instead of whatever? What are you going to do? Or are you going to take a long breath, deep breath, and accept your situation? You might be late. Yes, you might be fired. Whatever is going to be the circumstances, you have to ask yourself, you have to say two things. First of all, if you have no control over what's happening, stop worrying because it's not going to help you. And the second thing is not to take things personally. Because again, you can't be spiritual and say everything is part of the one, and at the same time have your ego so big that think that everything is about you, because it ain't. So the most important thing, and I try to remind myself that all the time, because you know I can talk about it now and then later on I can go outside and fall down and start cursing. No, it happens. So what I will have to remind myself is to accept the situation. There is no changing it right now. Accept it. And once you accept it, magic happens. Magic cannot happen where you're not accepting your situation.
God, I'm really amazed that you took the time out to talk to us today. I mean,
no, thank you.
It's so phenomenal. I learned so much about pain, about the acceptance, about, you know, listening to yourself and understanding who you are first. And that makes that shine so much. Like, I really would appreciate learning more by you reading your books. Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you, and continue doing this great job. I mean, what you're doing is fascinating, and it's incredibly important because everybody on this planet has to deal with pain. It's part of the conditions of coming here, you know. And if you have this, I forgot the name of that disease, it's called a disease, an affliction, when you cannot feel pain, it is considered to be the most dangerous thing possible. So think about it. People who do not feel pain are not blessed. They're constantly have to be monitored because of this affliction. So it's part of our mortal coils, like we said. And I always give the example of soccer playing, maybe because I never played soccer because my father was such a famous soccer player and it was my rebellion, but still I got something from it. And think about why soccer or football so popular around the world, because you have a bunch of people, actually 11, which is a master number, running after a ball, which is black and white, just like the yin symbol, the yin yang symbol. But that's besides the point, that they all decided for 90 minutes, we bind ourselves by time and space. We're going to have this square field. Nobody can get out of it. Nobody can touch the ball with their hands. Why? You have hands. God gave you hands. No, but that's the whole purpose. We're going to have restrictions of time, of space, of what we can use in our body. And that's going to make life so interesting. And that's why people gather from all over the world to see this bunch of people running around the ball where they can pick it up, but they're not allowed to. That's our human souls. We come here, we are born in this planet, deciding to be bound by space and time, even though souls are beyond space and time. And even Einstein told us that it's an illusion. And we have restriction. You cannot fly. Nope. You cannot remember the future. Not always. You have your diseases, you have your pain, but it's all why this game is going to be so interested and so transformative.
That is so true. Thank you so much, girl.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.